Admiral Zeftar stood before the young cadets in the military academy. His old scales had turned silver with age, and his forearms moved slowly as he gestured. The cadets sat quietly, waiting to hear about the Great War. They had heard stories, but never from someone who lived through it. "You want to know about humans?" Zeftar said. His voice was deep and tired. "You think you understand them because we are allies now. But 50 years ago, we made a terrible mistake. We thought humans were weak. Apsize, 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 apsize." The cadets leaned forward. Everyone knew about the human war, but the details were still classified. Only veterans like Zeftar could tell the real story. "It started with a simple patrol," the old admiral continued. "I was young then, commanding a battlecruiser on the edge of our territory. We found a strange ship drifting near the outer rim. It was small, maybe a third the size of our smallest warship. The metal looked primitive, and the engine design was laughable." Zeftar walked to the star chart on the wall. He pointed to a region marked in blue. "This was 50 years ago, before we knew about Earth, before we knew about humans. The ship sent us a message in broken galactic standard. The voice was soft, almost musical, nothing like the harsh tones of proper warriors." The admiral's eyes grew distant as he remembered. The captain of that ship was named Min-Jun Park. He was young, maybe your age. When we brought his ship aboard our cruiser, I got my first look at a human. He was small, soft-looking. No natural weapons, no thick hide, no claws. His skin was pale pink, and he had dark hair that fell over his eyes. He looked like prey. One of the cadets raised her hand. "Admiral, what did Captain Park say when he met you?" Zeftar smiled, showing his sharp teeth. "That's what surprised me first. He wasn't afraid. Here I was, 3 times his size, with claws that could tear through metal. My guards had plasma rifles pointed at him. But Captain Park looked right at me and said, 'Thank you for helping us. Our navigation system failed, and we got lost.'" The cadets murmured among themselves. This wasn't how enemy first contact usually worked. I told him he wasn't lost anymore. He was now property of the Catherian Empire. His ship, his cargo, his crew, everything belonged to us. It was standard procedure. Any species we encountered had 2 choices: join our empire as vassals or be destroyed. Zeftar paused, remembering the human's reaction. Captain Park tilted his head like a confused child. Then he said something I'll never forget. "I don't think you understand. We're explorers from Earth. We come in peace. We'd like to establish diplomatic relations with your government." The old admiral chuckled, but there was no humor in it. "Diplomatic relations. With us." The Catherians had conquered 47 star systems. We were the strongest military force in this sector. And this little pink creature wanted to negotiate. A young cadet asked, "What did you do, Admiral?" "I did what any proper Catherian officer would do. I showed him our strength. I had my men demonstrate our weapons, our technology, our numbers. I showed him recordings of our conquests. I thought once he understood our power, he would surrender gracefully." Zeftar's expression grew troubled, but Captain Park just nodded politely. He said, "Your civilization has achieved impressive military capabilities. However, I cannot surrender my ship or crew. I have orders to return home safely. Perhaps we can find another solution that benefits both our peoples." The cadets looked confused. Who would refuse to surrender when faced with overwhelming force? I gave him one final chance. I told him his ship would be destroyed if he didn't comply. His crew would be enslaved. His home planet would be marked for conquest. Do you know what he did? The academy hall was silent. He stood up straighter. His soft eyes became hard as metal, and he said, "Then I guess we'll have to disagree. But I won't let you hurt my people." Zeftar turned back to the star chart. I ordered him back to his ship. I thought he would reconsider when he felt our weapons targeting his hull. But Captain Park returned to his bridge and sent one message to my ship. We tried to do this the peaceful way. The old admiral's claws clicked on the podium. What happened next changed everything I thought I knew about warfare. Captain Park's small, primitive ship suddenly came alive. They had been scanning us the entire time, learning our systems. Their first move wasn't to attack our weapons or engines. They went after our communications array. One cadet gasped. Cutting off communications was considered a desperate, suicide tactic. Before we could react, they hit our navigation computer with some kind of virus. Our own systems started working against us. Then their ship moved in ways that should have been impossible. They used gravitational fields from nearby asteroids to slingshot around our weapons fire. Zeftar's voice grew quieter. For 30 minutes, one human ship fought my entire battlecruiser to a standstill. They couldn't hurt us badly, but we couldn't touch them. Every time we thought we had them cornered, they did something unexpected. They used our own weapon blasts to charge their shields. They fired mining charges that created debris clouds to hide in. The admiral looked at each cadet. Finally, Captain Park sent another message. We don't want to fight you, but we will if we must. Let us go. And no one needs to die today. Rend. The hall was completely quiet now. I was so angry. How dare this inferior species embarrass us? I called for reinforcements. 3 more warships, enough firepower to destroy a small moon. But when they arrived, Captain Park's ship was gone. They had slipped away, while we were focused on the battle. Zeftar walked back to the center of the room. That should have been the end of it. One small encounter with a strange new species. But I couldn't let it go. No one had ever escaped from me before. No one had ever made Cytherian forces look foolish. The old admiral's eyes grew dark with memory. I reported to High Command that we had discovered a new species that needed to be conquered quickly. I told them humans were dangerous because they fought dirty, used tricks instead of honor. I said they would be a threat to our expansion if we let them grow stronger. Zeftar looked directly at the youngest cadet. That was my first mistake. I thought Captain Minjun Park was just one clever enemy. I didn't realize I had just met the entire human race. Admiral Zeftar continued his story to the cadets. 6 months had passed since the first encounter with Captain Park. The young Cytherian officer had convinced his commanders that humans needed to be dealt with quickly. High Command agreed with my assessment, Zeftar said. We assembled the largest fleet in Cytherian history. 200 warships, 50,000 troops, enough firepower to conquer 3 star systems. We were going to show these humans what happened when you embarrassed the Empire. The old admiral activated a holographic display showing fleet formations. Our intelligence had located several human colonies, small settlements, maybe 10,000 people each. We expected to crush them in days and force Earth to surrender. One cadet raised her hand. Admiral, what was the first battle like? Zeftar's expression darkened. We chose New Sol Colony as our first target. It was a mining settlement on a rocky planet. Our scouts reported minimal defenses. Just a few patrol ships and basic shields. The colony administrator was someone called Lee So-young, an engineer who had never seen military service. The admiral paused, his claws tapping nervously. When we arrived at New Sol, everything seemed normal. The humans sent surrender demands, just as expected. But when our landing ships approached the planet, something was wrong. The mining equipment had been moved. Zeftar walked between the rows of cadets. Lee So-young had turned every piece of industrial machinery into a weapon. Mining lasers became anti-ship batteries. Ore haulers became guided missiles. Ore haulers, the gravity manipulators used for asteroid mining, created fields that threw our ships off course. The cadets listened with growing amazement. But that wasn't the worst part. When our troops finally landed, we found that every building, every street, Every tunnel had been turned into a fortress. The humans had spent 6 months preparing for our arrival. They knew exactly when we were coming. A young cadet asked. How could they know? Admiral, Captain Park had warned them. But more than that, they had been watching us. Human intelligence networks were already spread throughout our territory. They knew our plans before we made them. Zeftar activated another display, showing battle maps. The fighting was brutal. We had superior numbers and firepower, but the humans made every meter cost us dearly. They used the planet itself as a weapon, triggered landslides, diverted underground rivers, even changed the weather with their terraforming equipment. The old admiral's voice grew quieter. Engineer Lee So-young commanded the defense personally. She was everywhere at once, setting traps, coordinating strikes, evacuating civilians. Our soldiers reported that she seemed to know exactly where we would attack next. He showed images of the scarred battlefield. We won the battle. New Seoul fell after 3 weeks of fighting, but it cost us 40 ships and 8,000 troops for a small mining colony. And when we finally captured the settlement, we found it was empty. The cadets looked confused. Empty, Admiral? The humans had evacuated everyone. While we were fighting for the surface installations, they were moving the entire population through underground tunnels. Lee So-young had saved every civilian while making us pay the maximum price for worthless real estate. Zeftar turned off the display. That's when I began to understand. Humans don't fight to hold territory. They fight to inflict damage. Every battle was a trap, designed to hurt us more than it hurt them. The Admiral moved to the next section of his presentation. We attacked 6 more colonies over the next 4 months. Each battle followed the same pattern. The humans would fight desperately, cost us enormous casualties, then vanish before we could capture them. They left behind surprises. A cadet asked, "What kind of surprises?" Booby traps in the computers that destroyed our data networks. Time-delayed explosives that went off weeks after we occupied buildings. Computer viruses that made our own equipment attack us. False intelligence that sent our fleets into asteroid fields and gas giant storms. Zeftar's voice carried old frustration. But the worst was the psychological warfare. The humans broadcast messages on all frequencies. They showed recordings of our defeats, our casualties, our mistakes. They made jokes about Catherian military tactics. They sang songs that mocked our honor. The cadets shifted uncomfortably. One message was from Captain Park himself. He spoke directly to our soldiers. He said, "Catherians are brave warriors fighting for their beliefs, but your leaders sent you to die for their pride. Humans don't want to kill you. We want to go home. Stop attacking us. And this war ends today." Zeftar clenched his fists. That message caused more damage than any weapon. Our troops started questioning orders. Some ships turned around and went home. Others demanded to know why we were fighting a species that kept offering peace. The old admiral looked out the academy windows. By the end of those 6 months, we had won every battle but achieved nothing. The human colonies were gone. Our fleet was damaged. Our soldiers were demoralized. And Earth was still unconquered. He turned back to the cadets. That's when High Command made our second mistake. Instead of reconsidering the war, they decided to escalate. If humans wanted to fight dirty, we would fight dirtier. If they wanted total war, we would give them total war. Zeftar's expression was grim. We began bombing human colonies from orbit. No more ground invasions. No more trying to capture territory. Pure destruction. We thought this would force them to surrender. A cadet asked quietly, "Did it work, Admiral?" For exactly 1 day. Then the humans showed us what they had really been doing during those 6 months of fighting. The Admiral activated a final display showing space battle recordings. A human fleet appeared in the Kepler system. Not patrol ships or converted cargo vessels. Warships. Real military vessels with weapons we had never seen before. They moved faster than our ships, hit harder than our guns, and they were commanded by someone who understood war better than our best generals. Zeftar looked directly at the youngest cadet. The fleet was commanded by Park Jin-woo, Captain Park's younger brother, and he was not interested in making peace. Admiral Zeftar watched the cadets carefully as he continued his story. The young Catherians needed to understand what happened next, but the memories were still painful. Park Jin-woo was nothing like his diplomatic brother, Zeftar said. Where Captain Min Jun Park had tried to make peace, Admiral Park wanted revenge. His brother had died when we bombed the colonies from orbit. The old admiral activated a new holographic display showing fleet movements. The human counterattack began in the Kepler system, but it spread quickly. They had spent a year studying our technology, our tactics, our weaknesses. Every captured weapon had been improved. Every stolen ship had been reverse-engineered. A cadet raised her hand. Admiral, how could they improve our technology? We had centuries of development. Zeftar smiled grimly. That's what we thought. But humans approach technology differently. Where we perfect existing designs, they combine different ideas in new ways. They took our plasma cannons and added their computer targeting. They took our shield generators and powered them with their fusion cores. He showed images of human warships. Their new ships looked strange to us. Smaller than our battle cruisers, but faster. Instead of heavy armor, they used speed and maneuverability. Instead of fighting alone, they fought in coordinated groups that moved like flocks of birds. Zeftar walked to the center of the room. But the real difference was in their crews. Dr. Kim Hae-won, a human scientist, had spent months studying Catherian prisoners from the early battles. She discovered something we never knew about ourselves. The cadets leaned forward with interest. Catherians are individual fighters. Each warrior fights for personal honor, but humans fight as a unit, one mind controlling hundreds of ships. When they attacked, it was like fighting a single massive creature with perfect coordination. The admiral showed recordings of space battles. The Battle of Broken Chains was where we learned this lesson. Captain Choi Young-ho commanded a fleet of converted cargo ships against our Third Armada. By all logic, we should have destroyed them easily. Zeftar's voice grew quiet. Captain Choi's ships moved in perfect formation. When we targeted one vessel, the others covered it. When we broke their line, they regrouped instantly. And when they attacked, they used tactics we had never seen. A cadet asked, "What kind of tactics, Admiral?" "Ramming attacks." But not suicide attacks. The humans would accelerate their ships toward ours. Then at the last second, the crew would evacuate in escape pods. The unmanned ships would crash into our hulls at tremendous speed. The cadets gasped. Using ships as missiles was considered wasteful and dishonorable. We thought it was desperation. But then, we realized the truth. Every ramming attack was precisely calculated. They hit our ships in exactly the right place to disable engines or weapons without destroying the vessel completely. Zeftar showed detailed battle analysis. Captain Choi wasn't trying to sink our ships. He was trying to capture them intact. The ramming attacks created hull breaches that his boarding teams could use to take control of our vessels. The old admiral's expression was troubled. My own flagship, the pride of Catheria, was nearly taken this way. A human cargo ship, loaded with mining explosives, rammed our port side. The impact disabled our main guns and created a perfect entry point. He paused, remembering. Human Marines poured through the breach. They moved through our corridors like they had been studying our ship designs for years. Which, of course, they had. Dr. Kim Hae-won's research included detailed plans of every Catherian vessel class. A cadet asked, "How did you escape, Admiral?" "We didn't. The humans captured the bridge and took control of our computers. But instead of killing us or taking us prisoner, they did something unexpected. Zeftar's voice was filled with old confusion. The human squad leader, a woman named Sergeant Park Miran, asked if any of us were wounded. When we said yes, she called for medical aid. Human medics treated our injured soldiers while their Marines held us at gunpoint. The cadets looked puzzled. Then Sergeant Park made an announcement. She said, "This ship has been disabled, but not destroyed. Your crew will be given lifeboats and safe passage to the nearest Catherian base. Your wounded will receive medical care. This war ends when your leaders choose to make peace." Zeftar walked back to the star chart. They gave us back our ship. Damaged and defenseless, but functional. They could have captured hundreds of prisoners or destroyed a major warship. Instead, they sent us home with a message. The Admiral turned to face the cadets. That message was from Admiral Park Jin-woo himself. He said, "Catherians fight with honor when they choose to fight fairly. But you attacked civilians and bombed colonies. That was not war. That was murder. If you want to end this, stop targeting our families." A young cadet asked, "What did High Command say when you returned?" They were furious. Not at the humans, but at us for losing. They court-martialed Captain Vextar for surrendering his ship without being destroyed. They demanded to know how inferior human technology could defeat our superior forces. Zeftar's claws clicked on the podium. But some of us were asking different questions. How could humans show mercy in the middle of a battle? Why did they waste resources, healing enemy wounded? What kind of species fights a war while still hoping for peace? The old admiral showed images of more battles. The human counterattack continued for months. They struck at our supply lines, our communication networks, our isolated bases. But they never attacked our civilian colonies, never bombed our cities, never targeted anyone who wasn't actively fighting. He paused, looking at each cadet. Meanwhile, other species in the galaxy began to notice. The Thaxians, the Zephyr Collective, the Crystal Hegemony, all former enemies of the Catherian Empire. They saw humans defeating us using honor and strategy instead of overwhelming force. Zeftar's voice grew grim. One by one, they began switching sides. Not because humans promised them anything, but because they respected how humans fought. Clean victories, protection of civilians, mercy for defeated enemies. A cadet asked, "How many allies did the Empire lose?" "All of them." Within a year, the Catherian Empire stood alone against a coalition of dozens of species, all inspired by human leadership. The Admiral turned off the holographic displays. That's when I realized we were fighting the wrong war. Humans hadn't just built a better military. They had built a better civilization. One that other species wanted to join, instead of fear. Zeftar looked out the Academy windows again. The final phase of the war began when Admiral Park Jin-woo announced his fleet was ready to attack Kytheria Prime itself. Our home world. The center of our empire. The room was completely silent. But before he attacked, he sent one more message. Not to High Command, but to the Catherian people directly. Admiral Zeftar stood quietly for a moment, gathering his thoughts. The cadets waited patiently, understanding that this part of the story was difficult for their instructor. Admiral Park Jin-woo's message to the Catherian people was broadcast on every frequency. Zeftar said finally. He spoke in perfect Catherian, which shocked us. Few aliens bothered to learn our language. The old admiral activated a recording device. A human voice filled the Academy Hall, speaking in measured, respectful tones. People of Kytheria, I am Admiral Park Jin-woo of the Earth Defense Force. Your leaders began this war by attacking peaceful explorers. They continued it by bombing civilian colonies. Now they prepare to defend your homeworld using your own civilians as shields. Zeftar paused the recording. That last part was true. High Command had positioned military installations inside our cities, hoping humans would refuse to attack civilian areas. They were using our own honor against us. He resumed the recording. But humans do not make war on innocence. We offer terms of surrender that protect your families while holding your leaders accountable. Your choice is simple: remove the warmongers from power or watch them drag you into destruction. Zeftar turned off the recording and faced the cadets. Within hours, riots broke out on every Cytherian world. Not against humans, but against our own government. Citizens demanded to know why we were fighting a war we couldn't win against an enemy that didn't want to destroy us. A cadet raised her hand. "Admiral, what did High Command do? They made our final mistake. Instead of listening to their own people, they decided to make one last stand. Operation Final Honor, a massive fleet action that would either crush the human coalition or die gloriously in the attempt." Zeftar's expression was grim. "I was given command of the 3rd Defense Wing. 200 of our finest warships, crewed by veterans of dozens of campaigns. Our orders were simple: protect Cytheria Prime at any cost." The Admiral showed tactical displays of the approaching battle. The human fleet that arrived was unlike anything we had seen. Not just human ships, but vessels from every species in their coalition. They moved in perfect coordination, like a single living organism. He pointed to specific formations on the display. Admiral Park had learned from every battle of the war. His ships used Cytherian armor designs, Thaxian weapon systems, and Zephyr propulsion. But the tactics were purely human. Adaptive, creative, unpredictable. Zeftar walked between the rows of cadets. The Battle of Cytheria Prime lasted 18 hours. It was the largest space battle in galactic history. Thousands of ships, millions of lives at stake, the future of our civilization hanging in the balance. A young cadet asked, "Who won, Admiral?" That's the wrong question. The right question is, what did we learn? Zeftar activated new displays showing the battle progression. For the first 6 hours, we held our own. Cytherian ships were built for exactly this kind of fight: close range, heavy weapons, personal courage. But the humans didn't fight the battle we expected. The Admiral showed how the human formations moved. Instead of engaging our main fleet directly, Admiral Park's forces targeted our supply ships, communication relays, and command vessels. They were fighting our ability to fight, not our ships themselves. He paused at a specific moment in the battle recordings. 7 hours in, my flagship's main computer was hit by another human virus. But this one was different. Instead of destroying our systems, it showed us something. The cadets leaned forward. Real-time casualty reports, not just our losses, but human losses too. The virus was tracking every death on both sides and displaying the numbers on our main screen. Zeftar's voice grew quiet. Humans were dying to protect species that had been their enemies just years before. Thaxian pilots were sacrificing themselves to save human ships. Zephyr Marines were boarding Cytherian vessels to protect our civilians. A cadet asked, "Why would they do that, Admiral?" Because Admiral Park had convinced them they were fighting for something bigger than territory or revenge. They were fighting for the idea that different species could work together instead of destroying each other. The old Admiral showed the final phase of the battle. With 10 hours gone, our defense lines were collapsing. But instead of pressing their advantage, the human fleet stopped advancing. Admiral Park opened a direct communication channel to every Cytherian ship. Zeftar played another recording. "Cytherian warriors, you have fought with honor. Your courage is respected by every species in this fleet. But your leaders have lost this war. Surrender now, and no more blood will be shed. Continue fighting, and we will destroy your fleet to protect our own people." The Admiral turned to face the cadets directly. Half our ships surrendered immediately, not from cowardice, but from wisdom. They could see the battle was lost, and Admiral Park was offering them a chance to save lives. He paused, remembering. I was among those who continued fighting. Pride, duty, honor. Call it what you will. We attacked the human flagship with everything we had left. Zeftar's expression was complex, mixing shame with understanding. Admiral Park's ship, the Harmony, took massive damage from our assault. It should have been destroyed. But instead of retreating, Park did something that changed everything. A cadet asked, "What did he do?" "He surrendered his own ship." The room fell silent. The Harmony lowered its shields and stopped firing. Admiral Park broadcast one final message. "I will not order my crew to die killing brave enemies who are fighting for their beliefs. Catherians, you have proven your courage. Now prove your wisdom." Zeftar's claws clicked nervously. With the human flagship defenseless, we could have destroyed their entire command structure. One attack would have turned the tide of battle. But looking at that helpless ship, I finally understood what humans had been trying to teach us. The old admiral walked to the academy's windows, looking out at the peaceful campus. Strength isn't about having the power to destroy your enemies. It's about having the power to destroy them, and choosing not to. Admiral Park had defeated us completely, and his final move was to put himself at our mercy. Zeftar turned back to the cadets. I ordered my ships to stand down. The Battle of Catheria Prime ended not with destruction, but with every surviving Catherian commander meeting aboard the Harmony to discuss surrender terms. A cadet asked, "What were the terms, Admiral?" That's what shocked us most. There were no terms. Admiral Park didn't want our territory, our resources, or our submission. He wanted something much more difficult. The Admiral looked at each young face. He wanted us to become allies. Admiral Zeftar moved back to the center of the Academy Hall. The cadets sat in complete silence, waiting for the conclusion of the story that had shaped their world. The peace negotiations took place on neutral ground. Zeftar said, "A space station in the frontier zone, commanded by General Yoon Se-ri, who became humanity's first ambassador to our empire." The old admiral activated a holographic display showing the space station. General Yoon was different from the military commanders we had fought. She was a diplomat, but one who understood war. She had lost family in our bombing raids, but she never spoke of revenge. A cadet raised her hand. "Admiral, what did the humans demand as payment for the war?" Zeftar smiled sadly. "Nothing. That was what confused us most. General Yoon presented a treaty that asked for only three things: recognition of human sovereignty, establishment of trade relations, and a mutual defense pact. Well, when Yoon presented a treaty that asked for only three things, on the problem and considering." The cadets looked puzzled. "Mutual defense, Admiral? Humans wanted us as allies, not subjects. They offered to help defend Catherian worlds against future threats. In exchange, they asked us to help defend other species from aggression." Zeftar walked between the rows of students. High Command thought it was a trap. No one wins a war and asks nothing in return. But General Yoon explained human thinking to us. She said, "A defeated enemy will always plan revenge, but a respected ally will fight beside you forever." The Admiral showed images of the signing ceremony. The Catherian-Human Alliance Treaty was signed 6 months after the Battle of Catheria Prime. I was there, representing the reformed Catherian Defense Force, watching former enemies become friends. A young cadet asked, "How did the other species react?" They were amazed. Within a year, 37 different civilizations had joined the alliance, not through conquest or intimidation, but because they wanted to be part of something better. Zeftar activated displays showing technological and cultural exchange. The years after the war were the most prosperous in Catherian history. Human medicine extended our lifespans. Human agriculture fed our growing populations. Human education taught us new ways of thinking about old problems. The Admiral paused at an image of mixed human Catherian crews. But the real change was in how we saw ourselves. For centuries, Catherians defined strength as the ability to dominate others. Humans taught us that true strength comes from lifting others up. He showed recordings of joint military exercises. 10 years after the war, the Alliance faced its first major test. The Void Hunters, a species from outside our galaxy, began attacking frontier worlds. They were more advanced than any civilization we had encountered. Zeftar's expression grew serious. The Void Hunters expected to find a galaxy divided by constant warfare, easy to conquer piece by piece. Instead, they found dozens of species working together, sharing technology and tactics, protecting each other's worlds. A cadet asked, "What was your role in that conflict, Admiral?" "I commanded the Second Alliance Fleet, under Admiral Park Jin-woo's overall command. Fighting alongside the man who had defeated me, taking orders from humans, protecting species that had once been our enemies." The old Admiral's voice filled with emotion. And it felt right. For the first time in my life, I was fighting for something bigger than Catherian pride. I was fighting for the idea that different peoples could build a better galaxy together. Zeftar showed the final displays. Images of modern Alliance worlds, where multiple species lived and worked together. The Void Hunter War lasted 3 years. We lost many battles and many friends. But in the end, we drove them back beyond our borders. Not because we had better weapons, but because we had something they didn't understand. He looked at each cadet. Unity. Real unity, not forced cooperation. Humans, Kytherians, Thaxians, Zephyrs, all fighting as one people, with one purpose. The Admiral turned off the displays and returned to his position at the front of the room. Today, 50 years after first contact, the Alliance includes over 200 species. Peace is maintained not by superior force, but by mutual respect and shared prosperity. A cadet raised her hand. "Admiral, what happened to the people from the war? Captain Park, General Yoon, the others?" Zeftar smiled warmly. "Captain Min Jun Park is remembered as the first human to make peaceful contact with an alien species. There's a statue of him in the Alliance capital, with the inscription, 'He chose diplomacy when violence would have been easier.'" The Admiral's expression grew thoughtful. Admiral Park Jin-woo retired from military service and became director of the Alliance Science Council. He spent his later years developing defensive technologies to protect all member species. He paused, remembering friends. General Yoon Se-ri served as Alliance Secretary General for 20 years. She established the principles of interspecies cooperation that still guide us today. When she died, representatives from every member species attended her funeral. Zeftar walked to the Academy's memorial wall, showing names of those lost in various conflicts. But we also remember the cost. The thousands who died because I was too proud to accept Captain Park's first offer of friendship. The colonies destroyed because our leaders chose war over diplomacy. The old Admiral turned back to the cadets. "That's why you're here. Learning not just military tactics, but diplomacy, cultural studies, interspecies cooperation. So, the mistakes of my generation are never repeated." A young cadet asked the final question. "Admiral, what's the most important lesson humans taught us?" Zeftar considered the question carefully. "Humans showed us that the strongest warriors are those who fight only when they must, and who make friends out of their enemies when they can. They proved that showing mercy isn't weakness, it's the highest form of strength." The Admiral looked out the Academy windows at the mixed species city beyond. Today, Kytherian children play with human children. Our scientists work together on projects that benefit all Alliance worlds. Our soldiers train together to protect species we once tried to conquer. He turned back to the cadets one final time. 50 years ago, I thought humans were weak because they wanted peace. I learned they were strong enough to choose it, wise enough to offer it, and brave enough to fight for it when threatened. Zeftar's voice carried the weight of hard-earned wisdom. We battled the humans once, and we lost everything we thought mattered. Our empire, our dominance, our pride. But we gained something much more valuable. The old admiral smiled at the young faces before him. We gained friends, allies, and a place in something greater than ourselves. We learned that the best victories aren't won by destroying your enemies. He paused, letting his final words sink in. The best victories are won by turning your enemies into family. The academy hall fell silent as the cadets absorbed the lesson. Outside the windows, ships from dozens of species moved peacefully through the sky, carrying trade goods, scientific research, and messages of friendship between worlds that had once known only war. Admiral Zeftar looked at his students one last time. Remember this story. Remember the choice humans offered us, and the choice we finally made. And if you ever face an enemy who offers you peace, don't make my mistake. His voice was gentle but firm. Choose wisdom over pride. Choose cooperation over conquest. Choose the future over the past. The lesson was over, but its impact would last forever.